And I hope we have once again reminded people that man is not free unless government is limited. There's a clear cause and effect here that is as neat and predictable as a law of physics. As government expands, liberty contracts.
America's future will be bigger, better, bolder, brighter, happier, stronger, freer, greater, and more united than ever before.
The Liberty Podcast is brought to you by Proven Arms and Outfitters, specializing in rifles, pistols, tactical gear, and more. Learn more at ProvenOutfitters.com.
Hey, welcome back to the Liberty Podcast. It is 11 December 2024. We are on that countdown to Christmas Day. It is truly, for once, a wonderful time of the year, ode to the events of 5 November. You know, I'm telling people that it's great to be able to say Happy New Year and believe it. You know what I'm sending to all my Democrat friends this holiday season? Look what I found online. This fabulous Trump Christmas card depicting the scene from Butler, Pennsylvania last July when he rose up after somebody tried to blow his head off and nearly got away with it because these people with the Secret Service were asleep at the switch. Anyway, beautiful, isn't it? Beautiful. Well, we just got some news in within the hour, and it's always nice, isn't it, when Republicans do their job, do what we send them into the halls of the legislature to do. And they fulfill their obligations. Well, they did it just today, 11 December, in the North Carolina House of Representatives. All 72 Republicans, which comprise a supermajority, all 72 voted to override Governor Cooper's veto of Senate Bill 382. 382 was previously overridden by a Senate vote, the veto thereof. 382 is a bill that contains $227 million allocated for continued disaster relief in Western North Carolina. That means that 46 Democrats on 11 December voted against disaster relief for Western North Carolina. How are they going to explain that, especially the ones who live out that way? And there are quite a few of them. But here's the beautiful thing about Senate Bill 382. For once, the Republicans are playing hardball. We're the ones exerting our will because our voters have told us that that is what they want us to do. Senate Bill 382 has many other delicious provisions in it. Some of them deal with elections. This is big. The State Board of Elections appointment power is now transferred to the authority of the state auditor, who will be, as of January, Republican Dave Boliek. The auditor can make appointments to the 5-person board rather than the governor. And as we know, for the last 8 years, we've had a Democrat State Board of Elections, and of course, they are entirely opposed to voter ID and other precautions to keep the elections free and fair. They just want to win. Some other very practical things in this bill that now has been overridden. The veto has been overridden, and we win, and Cooper loses. And it won't be long before Josh Stein learns what that feels like. With this bill, the amount of time a voter has after Election Day to correct an absentee ballot is shortened from more than a week to 2.5 days. It also creates a deadline of 2.5 days after Election Day for voters who forget their ID to go to their county election office and present the ID for their vote to count. So the presumption here is that on the day they went to the polls without an ID, they were driving their car without a license. That's how dumb some of these Democrats are. Here's another delicious one, and I could go on and on. What Bill 382 accomplishes, it makes the State Highway Patrol an independent department, removing it from the jurisdiction of the Department of Public Safety. So absolute common sense. Here's one I really love. It will bar attorneys general, such as Josh Stein and incoming little Jeff Jackson, from participating in any legal argument that would result in a state law passed by the General Assembly becoming invalid. It prevents the Attorney General from taking a stance opposite of legislative leaders when they are involved in a lawsuit. This is fabulous. This is the way it ought to be. Instead of having an Attorney General who's constantly working against the will of the people. So that's very good news. 72 to 46, this very day, 11 December, Governor Cooper will head out the door after 8 years of tyranny with another veto smacked down and sent to the ash bin of history. Now, we mentioned attorneys general, and Josh Stein, of course, has been elected governor of North Carolina against a rather flawed candidate in Mark Robinson. That is a wound we will be licking for a long time to come. But Stein is coming in, and of course, incoming President-elect Donald Trump has said, as part of his campaign and as part of his first 100 days, that he wants to begin the mass deportation of illegal immigrants out of this country back where they came from. Not an easy task, not something that will just happen overnight, but one that needs to occur, given the litany of murders and crimes that these illegals are imposing on communities across the land. But when Josh Stein, governor-elect, is interviewed by ABC News about his views of mass deportation, he says he is waiting to see specific plans and policies from the new Trump administration before he responds. He told ABC's Jonathan Karl, one thing about President Trump is he says a lot, and then you don't know what the actual policy behind the bluster is going to be. And so I have to wait to see what he actually proposes as opposed to what he says through Twitter or other social media platforms. Then Stein goes on to couch his view of what actually constitutes an illegal immigrant. If folks break the law and harm North Carolinians, they get deported as it is. No, they don't, because there have been sheriffs up until recently who were refusing to cooperate with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE, refusing, harboring illegals, in other words, in their counties. He says that if folks break the law, they get deported as it is. Oh, no, they don't. They do not. But then he says, Stein, folks who are law-abiding, well, deporting them is not a priority at all. They are instrumental to our communities. They're instrumental to our economy. Well, they're not law-abiding. By entering the country illegally, they are absolutely not law-abiding. They broke the law the very first day they came here. Don't give me this law-abiding. And yes, I understand that you Democrats like to import all this cheap labor into the country to take jobs and wages away from natural-born legal citizens of this country. We know you like that. But guess what? Donald Trump's not going to give you a choice. He's going to send Tom Homan, little Josh Stein, into this state if you don't cooperate. And when it's time to send these illegal immigrants packing, they're going to be packing. And we might send you with them if you keep it up. Now, let's keep on this Attorney General theme. As you know, North Carolina Congressman Dan Bishop, NC District 8, ran not for re-election to the U.S. House, but for State Attorney General against Jeff Jackson, who's also a U.S. Congressman. in a very tight race in which Jeff Jackson had a lot more money to spend. Bishop, unfortunately, suffered a narrow defeat on November 5. And none of us really knew what the future might hold for Dan Bishop. I, for one, think he ought to consider someday primarying Tom Tillis and running for U.S. Senate. But maybe that's going to be put on hold because what came in on December 10? This news. Very good news for Dan Bishop. Donald Trump has nominated him to serve as Deputy Budget Director at the Office of Management and Budget. He announced it on Truth Social. Trump said, and I quote, "Dan will implement my cost-cutting and deregulatory agenda across all agencies and root out the weaponized deep state." You better believe it, he will, because that is what is in Dan Bishop's DNA, is cost-cutting and fiscal prudence and conservative principles. During his congressional stint, which began in 2019, Bishop gained attention as a member of the hardline conservative House Freedom Caucus. Yes, he did. At the Office of Management and Budget, Dan will be the wingman for Russ Vought, who is returning as the director of the Office of Management and Budget, a position he held under Trump's original administration between 2017 and 2020. He then went on to start the Center for Renewing America, and has a long history of serving in the world of government as an advisor on matters of budgetary policy. Russ Vought, and now he's got Dan Bishop as his wingman in Washington. So even though Dan is building a home in Moore County, North Carolina, right here beneath the pines, it appears he will continue commuting to and from the nation's capital. And what great news that is for Mr. Bishop, a good man in every sense of the word. Now, I know that some of you earlier this week got a chuckle out of the news coming from Carborough, up the road here, Carborough, North Carolina, a town that's been around since the early 1900s, a town that is adjacent to left-wing Chapel Hill, the home of the University of North Carolina. Carborough announced that it was filing a lawsuit against Duke Energy, one of the world's largest utility providers of both electricity and natural gas, because Duke Energy has been providing reliable electricity and energy to the community of Carborough for many, many decades. But in doing so, according to Carborough's lunatic Democrats, they have been promoting and contributing to the runaway climate change that is threatening to kill us all in any day now, they say. Their lawyer for the nonprofit that is actually paying for the lawsuit on behalf of Carborough, he tells the Washington Post they're going to look for damages in the area of $60 million. $60 million. Now, the mayor of Carborough says that the problem is that climate change is causing all kinds of distress, especially during when there are rain events and heat events. I did a little research about that. According to First Street, which is a data analyst that measures threat risks for communities, this year 11.3 of properties in Carborough have a risk of flooding. 11, so a little over 10%. In 30 years, according to this First Street analysis, 11.6% of properties in Carborough will have a risk of flooding. So climate change is going to increase their risk of flooding by 0.3% over 30 years. Are you kidding me? Dangerously hot days and heat waves may occur more often in coming years, First Street acknowledges. 30 years ago, Carborough experienced 11 dangerously hot days. That would have been in 1994, days in which the temperature exceeds 100 degrees. They had 23 of those extreme days in this calendar year, 2024. So they've gone up by, about doubled in 30 years, okay? Based on its projection model, First Street sees a possibility that Carborough will contend with 41 sweltering days in 2054, which means that the extreme heat days in Carborough will increase at a rate of less than 1 day per year over the next 30 years. That's interesting. The mayor was interviewed, and she said that they've filed the lawsuit against Duke Energy, and they're believed to be one of the first municipalities in the country to ever have filed a lawsuit against a utility provider to punish it for contributing to climate change, so-called. What she doesn't discuss in her media interviews is that she might actually be using climate as a diversion from more pressing issues in her town. According to a website that I visited called neighborhoodscout.com, the crime rate in Carborough is considerably higher than the national average across all communities in America. The chance of becoming a victim of either violent or property crime in Carborough is 1 in 50. Based on FBI crime data, Carborough is not one of the safest communities in America. Relative to North Carolina, Carborough has a crime rate that is higher than 66% of the state's cities and towns of all sizes. So, forget about passing out from excess heat and flooding. How about violent and property crime on all the days that aren't threatening weather-wise? That's a factor in real life, and we live in the real world. So, never mind, by the way, that Duke Energy has pledged to reach carbon zero emissions from electric power by 2050, which the last time I checked will be here before you know it. Well, folks, this is a newly formatted Liberty podcast. We're going to tighten these up, make them a little shorter, more frequent. And I got a cool new microphone here, which is going to make my voice sound even more authoritative, I hope. But we thank you for joining us here on the Liberty Podcast, and we will look forward to seeing you again next time.